There are very few stories in our history that seem like they have an ever-present staying power. Maybe you can think of a few, but that will actually start to highlight just how many of them don't last past their initial release date. One franchise that seems like it has been present and beloved since its inception is Transformers. I believe that this is mostly because Transformers has cut out a pretty unique lane for itself. I really can't name many series that have the same aesthetic and feeling like it. Sure, maybe others have elements of it, but most that seem like they're trying to rip it off never truly last long. And it's interesting that it even has created a special position for itself, especially since it was originally made as a way to repackage toys that were already popular in Japan in different names to the US. In fact, most of the Gen 1 Transformers toys were a mix between two separate toy lines that were both from Takara, who was also the creator of Beyblade, by the way, just thought I'd say that. One of these brands was called Diaclone, a line inspired by tropes of traditional mecha anime of the time, made with pilots and massive transforming robots, and the other one being Microchange, which itself was a spin-off of Microman, and that was brought to America under the name Micronauts by the company Mego. But Microman was actually a Takara rebranding of Hasbro's G.I. Joe toys in the 70s to be more appealing to Japanese children. Geez, does this franchise exist in some kind of Mobius strip of time? Anyways, it's interesting how everything just sort of clicked together. Eventually, Hasbro asked Marvel Comics, specifically Jim Shooter, who was editor-in-chief at the time, to make a story for them so they could find a way to sell it to American kids. Shooter first asked Denny O'Neil, who has written so many iconic comic books, including basically rehabilitating Batman to the modern version of him we know today. But that didn't work out due to disagreements, which then led to Bob Budiansky taking on the role, and they kind of took Jim Shooter's ideas as well as Denny O'Neil's ideas and mixed them together into a more streamlined plot. I know it was a lot, but it really establishes that by some sort of weird miracle, or maybe it's fate, that Transformers are even here. Side note, I also want to mention real quick, go watch the series The Toys That Made Us on Netflix. That's where I get a lot of my information for this section of the video. It's really good, please go watch it. I want them to make more seasons. They haven't covered any 2000s toys yet, and I think they're really missing out. Since then, it seems like Transformers are coming back every couple of years or so, but with a new story and a coat of paint. It's sort of like TMNT in that way. Or maybe TMNT is like Transformers? Yeah, that makes more sense. Yet with Transformers being around all the time, shockingly, I was never too into them as a kid. I know, from everything else I've posted on this channel, it kind of would make sense I would be a Transformers fan. But no, it never really clicked with me when I was younger. I was always more into Star Wars, Ben 10, Marvel Comics, Bakugan, TMNT, Shonen Jump, Yu-Gi-Oh!, pretty much every other major franchise in the 2000s. However, one of my best friends was always a big Transformers fan. Hey, if you're watching this, hi. I hope you liked the video, man. This one's for you. But that's how it was for me. It seemed like everyone else around me clicked to Transformers, be it friends or family members. I don't really know why, but I tried to get into it, but the only Transformers stuff I really liked was Transformers Prime. Though, to be fair, my first exposure to the series was the Michael Bay film, so maybe they poisoned my mind with a bad experience or something. Which is why the situation behind Transformers 1 is so fascinating to me. I first saw its trailer when it was making the rounds on the internet and just kind of blew it off. For one, I already didn't care for Transformers, and two, it just looked like a generic middle-of-the-road type of movie. Nothing to be excited over. That was until I started to see a growing sentiment online that this movie was genuinely phenomenal, and I just kind of responded to that like, really? Okay. Then I had a brain blast and remembered how Paramount and Hasbro absolutely massacred Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves with its terrible marketing. Which is a great film, by the way. I should probably make a review of that in the future. Let me know if you'd want that. Thus, my curiosity got the better of me. And I got in a call with my friend. Not the one who's a big Transformers fan, but another close friend who introduced me to Farscape. I should make another Farscape video eventually, now that I'm thinking about it. We sat down and watched it. And I guess, spoilers for the review portion of this video, but we were pleasantly surprised with how great this film came out. But I want to talk first about how they made this movie before basically screaming its praises from the high mountaintops of the internet. An interesting thing I learned when researching for this film is that it had actually been in discussion for some time before they even made it. But it wasn't a discussion as an animated film, but as a live-action one. They eventually chose animation as their medium of choice because, well, it would be far too expensive to make in live action. And they really didn't know if they could even capture Cybertron in its unique setting in a live action form to begin with. And I kind of agree with them. I really doubt you could catch something as fantastical and science fiction-y as Cybertron in a live action setting. At least now. On another note, I want to discuss the director of this movie, Josh Cooley. One, because he only directed one motion picture before this, and also that everyone behind the scenes speaks really highly of him. They all said he had this constant optimism and love for the source material. Kinda reminds me of how the cast of Star Wars The Clone Wars speak of Dave Filoni behind the scenes. And look where Dave Filoni is now, pretty cherished by the Star Wars community, excluding a couple of duds here and there. Interestingly, Josh Cooley is a triple threat of a creator. He's a director, writer, and animator, which makes him a pretty great pick for a Transformers film. And due to his previously built skills in all three, he actually did something interesting when developing the movie. He sort of swapped around the process of creating it, to be specific. They would do everything in rough storyboards, and then motion capture, which is very uncommon because usually most people save all that stuff for the end of the production cycle. But instead he actually put motion capture earlier so that it could inform the animators on how to finalize the scenes. It's sort of like using motion capture to make a rough draft of a scene, and then they could tweak it later or rework it in post, which is honestly very inventive. It explains why all the animation of the film has a nice yet real feeling to it. And speaking of visuals, they go into a lot of detail about what their general goals were and created the visual language of the world in the movie. To paraphrase a bit, they said they wanted to go in the opposite direction of the Spider-Verse films. Whereas Spider-Verse is very exaggerated, stylish, and very comic booky, they wanted to get as close to photorealism with touches of stylization, or, as I call it, stylized realism. It really seems like everyone working on the film had a sharp eye for detail, especially the director. But did all their hard work pay off? Well, let's find out. Before we start, I'm just going to warn you right now, there's going to be a lot of spoiler talk in this section, and if you actually want to watch the movie, I genuinely recommend going into it blind. Anyways, let's start the actual review section. First things first, I want to talk about how good the plot is structured. It's a style of plot that I like to call a plot gradient, or a style of movie where we see a major shift throughout the movie as in tone and character work, but usually mostly tone and aesthetic. Basically, the movie starts in a very different place from where it ends. At first, you'd think it'd just be the generic little guy proves he's just as cool as everyone else type of movie, but, as Tarantino once said, a good story unfolds and reveals new aspects of itself as it moves along. Which the movie does very well. This movie shows the idea perfectly of the characters being your plot, but also your plot being a character. It all ties together seamlessly with how each of these characters inform the plot. And if how these characters were different people, it probably would have gone differently, or not at all. It's always introducing new ideas to you in a way that is natural without any obnoxious exposition. It's smooth, to the point, and confident in the story it's telling. Speaking of the characters, they're all very well written. They bounce off each other well and have great quotable moments. Plus, all their personalities inform their decisions well, even the scumbag that is Sentinel, who feels like a villain you'd find in real life. Of course, the best arcs I want to highlight being Orion Pax and D16. Or, spoilers I guess, Optimus Prime and Megatron. Their arcs are interesting because they're both diverging but also parallel. Orion was shown to us to have been a bit of a rebel while Sentinel's regime was in control, whereas D16 just sort of accepted it. He completely bought into the world as it was, which interests me because they both have opposing reactions to finding out that everything Sentinel has told them is a lie. To Orion, it just confirms what he sort of already knew, even if he didn't completely know how to word it precisely. Sort of a gut feeling he always had being confirmed. But D16 had his complete worldview shattered, and thus has a more extreme reaction compared to the rest of the characters. D16, or Megatron, interests me so much because in some ways, he has a point. In my opinion, I actually think he was right in killing Sentinel. He was a tyrant, and if we're being real, he would have very likely have just tried to undermine progress at every moment, or even gone back to the Quintessons for help. However, the issue is that he takes too extreme of a stance. Yes, sometimes it takes extreme actions to create a change under extreme and controlling regimes. But when you turn your rebellion into a way to target people who were simply unknowing or ignorant of the situation, or hell, even people who weren't involved, that's when it becomes a problem. Like, sure, is it wrong that so many people took part in a horrible system built against you? Yes, absolutely. But if you turn literally everyone into an enemy, then that'll just make you as bad as a tyrant you overthrew. It's interesting because Megatron has traits very similar to many tyrants, dictators, and war criminals we know in our real history. Orion Pax, or Optimus Prime, also takes a rebellious role, however from a different angle. Optimus never truly loses his optimistic viewpoint, but he has an interesting growth of learning how to channel that aspect of himself. At the start, he's a rebel without a real major cause or knows how to achieve anything. He doesn't really become the Optimus Prime we know until Elita 1 gives him a good speech. And truthfully, it's a great speech. It's not a complete, "you're the best and you should never feel down" kind of speech. Instead, it's a realist perspective on how to uplift an idealist like Optimus Prime. It has a great sentiment being told here, more so being, trust yourself because there's a reason why you feel the way you do. And if I'm being real, I wish I had someone to give me that speech when I was younger because it would have helped a ton. Also, Alita 1 is a great character. I'm glad they didn't pull the whole I'm a strong woman through the lens of what's strong for a man type of character that everyone's tired of. Think of characters like Captain Marvel from the MCU. No, instead she has her own personality and goals. She's kind of a hard ass, but you kind of get why. She's the boss of a faction of Energon miners and is probably already under intense pressure under Sentinel and his cronies. Speaking of Sentinel, he's a great damn villain. I think we've all met someone like Sentinel in our real lives. Someone who will bend the truth or just completely fabricate parts of it for their own sense of superiority. But Sentinel is that times like 1,000. He literally changes and manipulates Transformers when they are born, just so he can create what is functionally a slave class for his own benefit. Like, holy shit. That's like a level of evil I haven't seen since like Order 66? It's genuinely fucked up. On top of that, he's just a good manipulator. Like, he convinces you at first that he may be a good guy, but it's everyone else working under him that might suck. But on a second viewing, I kinda read it more as him using Orion and D16 just to get Energon from the miners. Think of it as an incentive or motivator or some crap like that. Oh, and as for Bumblebee, I like him, but I don't always think his gag works for me. I get it. It's kind of a meta gag, because Bumblebee has mostly stayed mute ever since the 2007 Transformers movie. But they really doubled down on the gag of him not shutting up. Sometimes it's funny and sometimes it's just kinda meh. I think Optimus is way more funny in this movie than Bumblebee. Apparently, Chris Hemsworth actually ad-libbed a lot of the comedic lines and deliveries anyway, which doesn't surprise me because he's a genuinely funny guy in most of the other movies he's in. Bouncing off that point, every voice acting performance here is great, and finding out just how many voice actors were in this movie was so much fun. I mean, this movie has Steve Blum, which is always a good thing, and he's in it so many times. I mean, he is my favorite Starscream voice actor, and he's also the ever cool, ever stylish Spike Spiegel. But Chris Hemsworth, Brian Tyree, Scarlett Johansson, Keegan-Michael Key, John Hamm, Steve Buscemi, they're all great, especially Chris Hemsworth and Brian Tyree. They just melt into their roles. Hell, I didn't even know Chris Hemsworth played Optimus until I googled it, but Brian Tyree does the best performance of this movie. All I need to show you is this scene just to prove it.
No. Why? Why did you do that? Why? No. I'm done saving you.
That line read gave me goosebumps. I felt the fear and tragedy boil in my stomach and crawl out like an evil was destroying my body. On another note, the visuals are just something else, man. As I said earlier, they were kinda aiming for a bit of stylized realism, and then nailed it. In a way, it's kind of an evolution on what Pixar was doing in the 90s and 2000s. Not to say that those classic Pixar movies look bad, no, not at all. They still look incredible to this day. Instead, Transformers 1 feels like it's an extension of this visual style of storytelling. The world of Cybertron is just so enthralling. It feels like millions of years of lore and detail are poured into it all at once. I feel like it could stand toe-to-toe with classic sci-fi settings like Dune, Night City, and all sorts of other stuff. I especially love the surface of Cybertron. Seeing how everything is so biomechanical, or more like a machine tried to craft and mimic what life looks like on traditional terrestrial planets like Earth. The Quintessons are also just so damn cool. They feel like a Lovecraftian alien force just out there at the edges of the world waiting to grab you. They seem very machine-like, but in a way that's very different from Cybertronians are. I especially adore that their tech looks like as if it's some sort of synthetic organs or tools they add to themselves to improve their bodies. Kind of like the Yuzong Vong from the Star Wars Expanded Universe, except they're actually cool. Okay, that's like the third Star Wars reference in this video, I need to stop doing that. When you really think about it, everything in this movie feels like a labor of love. Hell, I got someone like me, who really didn't care before, to be interested. And don't we need more movies like that? Or rather, more things like this in general? It feels like everything these days is just getting a franchise just to pump it out and make money. Even franchises that had a ton of fan loyalty are now losing fans due to just the bloat and the slop of everything being pumped out. Stories I used to love, I'm now just lukewarm on. Not just because I moved on, but I'm just worn out for being fed constant slop. Which is why I feel like this movie is important to cover. Because it shows the fundamental aspect of making a long-running franchise is not being constant or being everywhere. But instead it's about putting out quality, making people want more, but also knowing when to leave. I think that artists need to know when to do that, when to leave, and also when to put out something that actually matters. It just makes me sad that this movie may never grow into what the director wanted it to form into. Supposedly, he wanted to do more with it, making more movies to expand the characters, world, and story. And yet, we get to a story as old as time. A story of crummy corpos and producers not understanding the thing's appeal that they're trying to market. Instead, they marketed it like you would a generic animated movie when it definitely was not that. It was something far greater than that. Something a lot more mature, too. This movie is a true work of art. Sure, it's based on a toy franchise for children, but it knew it needed to be more and reached its potential. I just hope that all the videos on the internet, mine included, do get heard, and maybe we could get more Transformers films like this out of it. Maybe you can call it Transformers 2 or something, I don't know. Here's to hoping for more, right? And that's all I gotta say. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope that this video makes you want to go see it, or hey, maybe you already have. Let me know what you thought down below. And maybe while you're at it, let me know what you feel about Transformers as a whole. I'd honestly want to know where to start because this movie made me want to do a bit of a deeper dive into the series. With all that being said, I'll see you next time.